Good afternoon, everyone. I'm McKenna Schaefer, an admissions counselor at the Institute of Beauty and Wellness and Aveda Institute Madison. Today, we're kicking off week 2 of our Beauty Cares live education series. First, we have Kurt Kueffner, an educator on Barber foundations, followed by Terri Wojak at 3 p.m. Central with education on chemical peels. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone that admissions will still be holding virtual tours and career planning sessions with counselors at both our Madison and Milwaukee locations during our distance learning time. If you're interested in learning more, check out the links in the video description below and we'll get you connected with an admissions counselor. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kurt Kueffner from AvedaMeansBusiness.com. Kurt has spent his entire career focused on the business of men's grooming. From apprenticing with Horst Rechelbacher to becoming an educator himself, Kurt has worked for both Aveda and American Crew, growing barber programs all across the world. Up next, Kurt Kueffner.
Hello, everybody. Kurt here. I'm hoping everybody is safe and sound, and I'm assuming that you're all in your own homes. I'm not sure. I'm really grateful to have a chance to talk to you today. I'm here, I've got about 45 minutes, and when I got this call about this opportunity, I was going to set up my house and do a haircut on a mannequin head. And I said, you know, I think if I was housebound, and particularly if I was a student, that maybe the most interesting thing I could try and understand would be a little bit more about equipment, and more importantly, a little bit more about how to use it. So what I'm hoping to do today is have kind of not a top line, but not a deep dive, somewhere in the middle. I would like to talk about combs. I would like to talk about scissors. I would like to talk about clippers. And with all of them, I would like to talk a little bit about the mechanics and some tips about the most effective way to use those tools. So I'm going to go with combs first. And my thing with combs is it's really personal with me. I am much more likely to do a good haircut if I have the right comb than if I have the right clipper or the right scissor. Combs are just incredibly important part of what we do, and I see people kind of not give them the attention they deserve, or possibly working with combs that have got missing teeth, or more often than not using the wrong comb for the job. And Horst used to teach us. I apprenticed under Horst, and my introduction said that I'd spent my whole life in men, and I haven't. I'm licensed as a cosmetologist and a barber. And when I apprenticed under Horst, he would tell us that combs to hairdressers are like paintbrushes to artists, and that you should use the big brush for large amounts of real estate and little brushes for the specific little details. And with that, now that I'm in the men's business a lot, I have kind of found that is true. A lot of people think that the little tiny tapered combs are the barbering combs, only for detail and finishing. So let me give you 4 kinds of combs, 4 kind of broad categories of combs, and then we will, possibly if you have some questions, I can read them here. But in men's haircutting, the first kind of comb is a flat top comb. It's the biggest comb. They're paddle shaped, they're usually flat, and the key with these combs is they're specifically designed to do the top of a flat top. So they're not traditionally clipper combs. They're for the top. You got a special grip you use on them, or you lay them in your hand like this. They're great for doing flat tops, but a lot of people confuse these for clipper combs. And what makes them a little awkward for clipper combs is they usually have a really thick spine, and they don't have the kind of flex or dexterity that you need to kind of get around bone structure. So they're good for flat tops. I would have one if you're going to do the occasional flat top, but I don't know that I would use it for a clipper comb. So the second kind of comb we have is a clipper comb. And these combs you're going to use much more of the time if you're doing men's hair cutting. They have, they're big enough to kind of protect you from hitting the head. If you've got a clipper or cutting tool, they're safe. They drop your blood pressure, but they have to have a lot of flex, and you want a little bit of a thinner spine on the comb so that you just have more sensitivity to depress it into bone structure if you're trying to take out a shadow or a mark. Having that amount of flex is an important thing. And the tooth count on these is generally standardized. Most people don't use a clipper comb with wide and fine teeth. They usually have one tooth count, and that's the one you want to get used to. So that's your second comb. The third comb that I want to talk about is styling combs. And this is where it gets a little bit trickier. I picked what I consider to be the 3 most popular styling combs in the market. And this is the Y.S. Parks comb. This is, I don't even know who makes this comb. This is one Antoinette uses. And this is the Sabone comb. And I have to tell you that they behave so totally differently. This comb has a parting tooth. If you can see at the coarse tooth side, it looks like there's a broken tooth in it. And it's a really expensive comb. But that parting tooth is there to help you make clean partings. And they're great when you're doing work that demands a lot of accurate parting. They're great when you're doing updos. They're great when you're doing color. What they're not great for is cutting men's hair, because where you have that missing tooth is just like having a broken tooth, and you miss all the tension there when you're working with a scissor over comb technique. So they're great combs. I love them. And I use them traditionally when I'm cutting mid-length women's hair that I'm going to be parting and holding between my fingers. This comb, the one that Antoinette uses, I love as well. It's a comb that I use when I'm cutting longer hair or chemically processed hair, because the teeth on the coarse tooth side are so wide that it's much easier with hair that has a tendency to want to tangle, hair that has a tendency to want to, where you need that wider spacing because you are having trouble getting through the hair with a standard comb, a standard styling comb. So I love these long hair, highlighted hair that has a tendency to want to continue to be a little bit of a challenge to comb through. Great comb. But the comb that I use on men exclusively is this comb. And this is the Sabone comb. And they're bulletproof. They used to only come in green. Now they come in, this is the original, the green one. Sassoon's Camp used these. Now they make them in white and they make them in orange. This comb, the thing I love about this comb is that it's got an incredible amount of flex and dexterity, which is important to me. I don't like combs that are too stiff, and I think you're going to have to experiment with that. But the other thing that's great about this comb is that it works brilliantly for overcomb work, because it's got teeth, symmetrical teeth, relatively fine on the coarse tooth side, all the way to the end. So styling combs, third kind of comb. Third, flat top, clipper comb, styling comb. And then the fourth kind of comb I want to talk about is this comb, and it's a barbering comb. Now, barbering combs are a really precious thing. I mean, this is a very nuanced finishing comb, and you don't use them for large amounts of work because they're hard on your nerves. I mean, you will fall off that skinny little tip of the comb with your cutting tool and make a mark in the haircut. So they're a really good comb for the very final part of a haircut when you're taking out a little mark, a little shadow, pulling the hair down to clean up the outlines. They're an imperative hair comb to have. It's just, don't think because it's a barbering comb that you're going to use it on a whole man's haircut. Okay, so that's our 4 kinds of combs. I want to show you with every tool, I want to talk to you a little bit about some dexterity exercises, and that's what I'm hoping you can do while we are all in some isolation. And while I was sitting here preparing for this class, sure enough, I was watching Hairbrained, and their quote of the day is, "Did you practice today?" So this is some stuff you can practice. All right, I'm going to give you, during the course of our conversation here, I'm going to give you about 4 or 5 things that you can practice, and you can take it from me. Guarantee you the dexterity that you learn from practicing these disciplines, these mechanical exercises, will greatly enhance your fluidity and the quality of your work. Just know that that's true. So with the combs, there's 2 things I want you to think about practicing. The first thing is simple windmilling. And what windmilling means is being able to spin the comb in one direction and the other direction. Do it non-stop until you get great dexterity windmilling. And then put it in your other hand and windmill with your dominant and your non-dominant hand. You always want to have that kind of immediate response with your comb to be able to go. The reason that you windmill a comb is so that you can go from the coarse teeth of the comb to the fine teeth of the comb, to the coarse teeth of the comb, to the fine teeth of the comb. And what happens, particularly when you get into precision haircutting, is the reason that we have coarse teeth on a comb, the reason that Wyeth Parks makes a parting tooth is so that you can part with the parting tooth and then gather with the fine teeth. It's part with the parting tooth, gather with the fine teeth, part with the parting tooth, gather with the fine teeth. And getting that little motion and just making that kind of part of your cadence in your head is really important. Hold on. I got a text. I think it's from you guys. Hold on. Here's some questions that are coming in. What are my favorite brands of combs? I'll answer those. What's the best comb for curly or textured hair? I'll answer that. And how often do you recommend practicing? You guys, I'm a practicing freak. Practice for an hour a day. Everybody practices. Symphony players practice for 4 hours a day and they're already in the symphony. Practice, practice, practice. Better mechanics make better outcomes, period. My favorite combs, I use a $1.99 wall clipper comb. I have my entire career. It's this one. I love the Wyeth Park barbering comb. I use any flat top comb. I happen to use Andis's. Again, they're $1.50. But how often are you going to use it? You don't need a great flat top comb. Styling combs are the one thing that you want to really marry. You want to find one that you love. You want to buy a dozen of them. You don't want to be changing your tool every time somebody sits down. You want to have a tool for a specific purpose. That's why combs are different. So, and I'll get back to some of that in a minute. Let me show you the second exercise, and then we'll move on and talk about scissors a little bit. The second exercise I'm going to show you with the clipper comb. All right, windmilling. And believe me, when you watch great people on social media, they know how to windmill their comb. They're really good with that finite dexterity. It matters. This second exercise is usually referred to as a C grip. And what you do is you put your comb in your hand and kind of secure it here. You want to wrap these fingers around it so you're not worried about dropping it. So your ring finger kind of secures the comb, and then you steer it with your index finger and your thumb, with your pointer finger and your thumb. So you want to be able to go 180 degrees with your comb, 180 degrees without ever moving your wrist. It's all fingertip control. My wrist is absolutely stationary, and I've got complete dexterity with the comb. Couple of things I want you to think about. You only have to rotate the teeth away from your body. You never have to rotate the teeth back towards your body because there's not hair there. The hair is away from your body. So you go to the ceiling and to the floor, and to the ceiling, and to the floor. And so many brilliant things happen when you do this. The first thing you want to do is sort of a sobriety check, is when you're practicing this, ask yourself, is my pinky out so I can anchor it against the head to find a stability point when I'm working? If your pinky is out, you're probably, pretty close to having the technique right. And then you go to the ceiling and to the floor and to the ceiling and to the floor. That C grip, you use it with every comb when you're with a clipper over comb or a scissor over comb. It's just a broad use, non-dominant hand technique. I think it's the most important single technique you can learn. If I was at home doing one thing, it would be going to the ceiling and to the floor. And how they taught you this in barber school was they'd take a ruler and they would masking tape it to your wrist. So you were sure that you didn't move your wrist. You were sure that you just did it with your fingers. All right, so those are my two, you understand the combs. Those are my two things. Windmill, both hands. C grip, non-dominant hand. Got it? I'm checking for more questions, see how we're doing. I'm having fun. You guys good? No more questions at the moment. Now I'm going to talk about scissors a little bit. And again, a lot of this is kind of subjective. Different people have a little different opinions, but there's pretty big rules, pretty big sort of overarching rules. With scissors, probably if you were to ask anybody, 5 3/4 inch scissor would be the average. Anything shorter than 5 3/4 is getting a little shorter. Anything over 6 inches is getting a little longer. In men's hair cutting, generally scissors are a little bit longer, and that's because in men's hair cutting we do a lot more scissor over comb work. And what longer scissors give you is they give you a larger workspace. If your scissor is as long as the bar of your comb, you get all that real estate, where a short scissor, you just don't get as much hair into it when you open and close it. So I'm going to tell you, if you want one scissor and you don't want to switch between scissors, probably 6.5 inch scissors are really nice, medium, what we call an all-purpose scissor. You get to 7 inches and they get a little bit clumsy when you're doing precision hair cutting. It's just a lot of scissor to work palm to palm with. I use two kinds of scissors. I use usually a 6.5 and a 5 3/4. I like a shorter scissor when I'm cutting women's hair. I like a shorter scissor when I know I'm going to be cutting on the inside of my hand a lot. Those are the only two scissors that I own with a straight blade, 5 3/4 and 6.5. What's important is that this side of the scissor, you standardize, all right? What you don't want to do is have your muscle memory having to make a totally different grip every time you pick up a scissor. So whether I'm using a long scissor, a short scissor, or a blending scissor, my hand has the same muscle memory. And how you're supposed to do this is open your hand and close it and kind of find, where does your thumb naturally fall? Does it fall back a little bit? Does it fall forward a little bit? If it falls back a little bit or forward a little bit, you probably want parallel holes. If it falls back a little bit, you probably want even more of an offset than this. You know, and if you're at a hair show, go to the shear guy and try out everything and find what creates the least resistance in your forearm, all right? So I got a blending shear, a short shear, and a long shear here. But if you look, they're all exactly the same from the screw on into my hand. That is always going to be. I use scissors with a tang. I use scissors with a mild offset, about a 30-degree offset, and I measure the shank between the screw and the finger hole, because the longer the shank is, the further your thumb has to swing to open the scissor. So do that and just make it a habit. it's just every time you're going to buy a scissor, bring your favorite, most comfortable scissor with you and look from the screw to the right. Look to what's going to live in your hand because the blade's going to determine the characteristics, but the right hand is where you want to build really good muscle memory. Okay, so that's my scissor deal. The next thing I'm going to talk about is blending scissors. And I'm not going to get too deep into this, but tolerate a little bit of blending shear conversation. Here's what we know about blending shears. The conventional wisdom says that if they have 26 teeth or more, it's a blending shear. It's going to soften the hair and take out weight. It's not going to leave a line of demarcation to mention. It's just going to reduce bulk. If you have less teeth than 26, you're probably going to start to disrupt the haircut quite a bit. And how that happened was traditional old blending shears were all 26, 28 tooth count. And then this guy named Irving Rusk, I give him credit for it, this hairdresser in the 80s came out with these notching shears. And the goal of the notching shear was to actually disrupt the haircut, to create a really strong channel cut, textured, rough finish to the haircut. And that gave way to a lot of the work Tony and Guy did. It gave way to a lot of the bedhead thing in the 90s. It was those really coarse-toothed notching shears. And they're great for what they're built for, but they're not blending shears. They're not softening shears. They're texturizing shears. So you don't want to mistake a tooth, a jagged tooth scissor as a blending shear, especially if you get a tooth count under 24. You're starting to get a different result in the haircut. So the other thing I want to talk about, I have 3 blending shears. And it's an important thing to know. These 2 blending shears have 30 and 32 teeth. One of them is made by the Scorum guys, one of them is made by Hikari. They're both really high quality. These are the 2 that I use. And what happens with these that you'll notice is the cutting blade is on the side where the head is. And that to me has been how I was trained. That's what I use. Now, there are this kind where the cutting blade is where your body is, and they behave totally differently. I find that I don't know that they're a bad scissor. I just wasn't trained with them, and I end up working too hard and taking out too much hair with them. So anyway, with blending shears, there's the 2 things that you want to know. You want to know, 1, does it got over 26 teeth? And 2, can you slide cut with it? Because the really good ones, that's a great technique to be able to close them while you're sliding through the hair. Whereas with the cheaper ones, they're going to rip. So it's an important tool to buy one good one and make sure, if you're at a hair show, take it on the mannequin head. Make sure that you can slide as you're closing it without ripping or dragging in the hair. Okay, so now I'm going to show you my favorite scissor exercises. I'm going to check for questions here. Are we doing good? Oh, again, I got a couple. I'll get back to these. So with scissors, there's 2 things that I think are really the single most important thing with scissors that we all have a challenge with is isolating our thumb. That's the key. You've got a stationary blade and a mobile blade. And my favorite exercise I learned in barber school, somebody asked, how often do you do it? I still do it all the time. This is something that I have to reinforce my muscle memory with all of the time, and it shows in my work. So how they teach you to do this in barber school is you take your scissor and you put it, on your ring finger, and you wrap your first finger all the way to your first knuckle over it. All right, so you're actually pulling the shear back towards your heart. It's called the heart grip. So when I was in barber school, that's where you would get the callus, would be on your ring finger from pulling the scissor back towards you. And then your thumb never goes through the thumb hole. Your thumb just rests on the outside of the thumb hole. And because if your thumb does go through the thumb hole, you can't open the shear all the way. And I'll show you that in a minute. So the heart grip, you're creating tension with the scissor, with your fingers, and then you're pushing away with your thumb a little bit. And what they teach you to do in barber school is, you see this, you need to have 90 degrees plus of extension with your thumb. You don't want to be opening and closing your scissor this much, because if you do, you're going to make marks in your haircut. Swing your thumb to where you're past 90 degrees. Now, the way to do this, the brilliant way to do this, and we had to do it to the person who asked, how often do you practice? We had to do this for our theory in the morning while we were listening to lecture. Let me see if I can do this. Take your leg, take your scissor and put it in that heart grip. All right? Then lay your hand backwards on your leg so that you cannot move your fingers. You want your hand to be totally isolated, so the only thing you can move is your thumb. And then open your thumb to about 110 degrees and close it. And what happens is there's only one muscle that's activated when you do that. Can you see that on the screen? And if you're only opening it that far, you're not doing yourself any good. You want to swing it to 110 degrees open and close. So you just do that until it hurts. Do it every day, and you'll never get perfect, but you'll get so much better, because this gets into your central nervous system. You learn how to swing your thumb open while keeping your fingers stationary. And then when you turn your hand over, you should be able to swing your thumb without moving your fingers. That's the goal. Good? So that's called the heart grip. You're pulling the stationary blade towards your heart, pushing out with your thumb, and then you're isolating. And then the second grip, and this is a more common grip, is this. And where you have your finger, instead of pulling the shear towards you, you have your finger right up on this screw. And how this works, I hope you can see with my body, is I'm going to be using the heart grip when I'm working on the bottom half of a haircut with an overcomb technique. I'm going to go to this grip the minute I take a section between my fingers and I'm working into the top. Because if I try and work in the top of the head like this, I've got way too much rotation in my wrist and my elbow is way too high. I can drop my elbow and straighten out my wrist when I go to the secondary grip. And those are the only two grips. This one's for overcomb technique. This one's for working on the top of the head. And they both are meant to keep your elbows as low as you can and have the most effective work or use of your tools. Good? So somebody said hi, somebody else said they're excited. Let me see. Somebody said love your lip color. I'm sure that wasn't for me. Do I have any questions? Are we still good? All right, so 2 exercises. Heart grip with isolating your thumb, and then I just do this. I go between this grip and this grip and this grip and this grip. I just do it to make sure that I've got that dexterity down, so that I'm always reminding myself to have the right relationship with my scissor while I'm working. So the last thing I want to talk about is clippers. And clippers are a little bit bigger of a conversation, because there's just so much more to talk about as far as blade tolerances and ceramic versus steel and manufacturer differences. It's a class. It's a really big class. But I can go into kind of some big ideas about clippers and some mechanics. So the first thing I want to say is that there's 3 different kinds of clippers. There's your stationary fixed bladed clippers, which are edgers. You know, the blade does not adjust, nor does it come off. It's just a fixed bladed tool. Most of those are at a 3/0 tolerance. Most of those cut about 1/100th of an inch. The second kind of clipper is what we call an interchangeable bladed clipper, where the blades actually come off. And these you have, in order to get a different tolerance. The word tolerance means how long does a clipper blade cut if you hold it right against the skin, cutting as short as it can possibly cut. That's the clipper blade tolerance. So the clipper blade tolerance, in order to get different tolerances, you need to buy different blades. And that looks like this. There's, you know, I travel with these 9 blades, but I own probably 20 different tolerance blades. And they go from a 5/0 to arbitrary numbers over 3.5. So why would somebody use an interchangeable bladed clipper? You know, what would the reason for that be? And the simple answer is interchangeable blades, because they are non-adjustable, they can't go out of adjustment. All right, every clipper's blade is made with a cutting blade, which is the movable blade, and the fixed blade, or what they call the feeding blade. And that's the one that goes against the head. So how long does a clipper blade cut? What is its tolerance? Well, it has to do with how thick is the feeding blade and how far back is the cutting blade. That's what determines the length of the clipper blade cuts. Well, with interchangeable blades, the cutting blade is in a metal groove. It's machined. So they never end up with this blade tilting and cutting somebody. They're really durable. You hardly ever see them with broken or missing teeth. And I like to think about it like photography. You know, a camera either has a zoom lens or a fixed lens, a prime lens they call it. And these are like prime lenses. They last forever. They're really durable. They're maintenance free. I mean, you got to oil them, but you don't have to adjust them. You're not always having to goof with them. And in the old days, and I say the old days, and I mean 10 years ago and further, these were always attached to a motor-driven clipper, which was more powerful. So like the old Oster 76s, they were meant for shearing sheep. So you had a blade that was really sturdy on a really big motor-driven clipper that had a magneto in it, and it would shear sheep. I mean, it was an actual pet grooming tool that was really powerful. So that was important to us in the 90s because we were shampooing every man's hair and cutting off a lot of bulk. Guys were coming in every 6 weeks, and the Oster 76s would just peel through that bulk, where a lot of the adjustable bladed clippers would get bogged down and go wah. So they're great. I mean, I love them. I will always have an interchangeable bladed clipper around. They work beautifully. They take a little bit more kind of understanding and a few more pieces, but they're really good clippers. More powerful, don't go out of adjustment. They're beautiful. What I want to say, and I'm going to say this before I talk about adjustable bladed clippers, the thing about clipper blades, this is the key. This is probably, other than the comb grip, this is probably the most important sort of insight that I want to share today. Clipper blades come in either a smooth blade. This is a number 2 blade, and if you can see, it's totally smooth. It's called a smooth blade, okay? This is a fluted blade. And if you look at it, you can see all of those flutes in it, all of those grooves that it has in it. All right. Smooth blade, fluted blade. Well, what happens is the fluted blades, nobody told me this when I was younger. The fluted blades are all beveled so that when you put them on the head, they're beveled to come off and taper. You can see the bevel goes away from the head, okay? Where the smooth blades are beveled to stay on the head. They're beveled towards the head. And they are meant to scrape the head rather than taper off. They're designed differently. If you just hold two of them up in profile, one bends one, here, I'll do it this way. You can see one bends one way and one bends the other. So a lot of times people will grab a thick, smooth blade and try and taper with it, and the blade's lousy at doing that. It's not what they're meant for. With smooth blades, you can also, at the low tolerance, you can make them cut shorter because these flutes take up some space, right? So any 5/0 blade is going to be smooth because you can't cut down to a 5/0 tolerance and still have flutes. There's just no room for them. But when you're learning to taper, get a fluted blade. I mean, if you have any anxiety about it, the smooth blades just don't like to come off the scalp. They're tough. They're harder to use. So that's interchangeable blades. Now I'm going to talk just a little bit about adjustable blades. Then I'm going to talk about blade tolerances, and then you can ask me some questions, okay? So I'm going to say this is an adjustable bladed clipper. The difference between a fixed blade clipper and an adjustable bladed clipper is this. It's the armature on the side, and that's what opens and closes the blade. Now, you can get all of this information online, but usually a manufacturer is going to tell you that their adjustable bladed clipper cuts at about a 0.00 when it's closed, which is never true, but they'll say that, and about a number 1 when it's open. That's what the scope of this lever is going to give you. Closed is about a 0.00, open is about a number 1. I find that they're never a 0.00 when they're closed. And again, this is a big ass conversation because they have different feeding blades that you can screw on these that give them a different characteristic. But this is just something I can tell you about teaching workshops for a living is these are 2 wall clippers. And this heritage clipper that they made that I love comes out of the factory with a fluted blade. Their wall senior comes with a smooth blade. Can you see the difference? The wall senior cuts way shorter than this 1918 heritage clipper. So people don't know that. They pick up a clipper and they just make assumptions about how close they're going to cut. I can do a workshop where people are doing skin fades, and I can look around the room and I can tell you what tools they're using by how short their mannequin head is. It's a funny thing. So that's it. You want to be, and I'm not saying there's a better or worse. I like Wall Magic clippers. I think Wall has got really good cordless technology. I like Andis cordless interchangeable bladed clippers. I think they've got good technology as well. And I like cordless clippers across the board now. I mean, the reason I never used to use adjustable bladed clippers was they just weren't that powerful. They are now. They're getting better all the time. So buy a good one. They're worth it. So smooth blades, fluted blades, interchangeable blades, adjustable blades. Adjustable blades, I didn't, the obvious answer is the interchangeable blades don't need adjustment. Adjustable bladed clippers do. And I used to really not encourage people to have them because I travel around, and every time I'd walk into a salon to do a class, someone would open their drawer and pull out a clipper that had broken teeth, that was out of adjustment, that hadn't been oiled, and would make horrible noise when they turn it on. And I'd spend half of my day doing a clipper repair class instead of a clipper cutting class. And not only do they not work when they're out of adjustment, they're dangerous. They cut people because you get cutting blades coming over feeding blades, or a tooth missing, and you press it against the skin and the cutting blade is going to cut the skin. So they're fussy. They're still fussy. And if you get one, go on the manufacturer's website and learn how to use it. You know, learn how to maintain it. They've got great videos on all the manufacturers' websites. Keep it oiled, keep it greased, keep it clean. So then the last thing I'm going to tell you, two last things. My idiot-proof way to remember clipper blade tolerances, whether it's a plastic attachment that goes on one of these, you know, whether it's one of these attachments that you put on, or whether it's a metal blade that you're changing. I got to say a little something about that. But regardless of what it is, within reason, we believe that hair grows 1/2 inch a month. That means every numerical whole number going up is 1 week's worth of hair growth. Because a number 4 blade or a 4 guard is 1/2 inch. A 2 guard is 1/4 inch, and a 1 guard is 1/8 inch. So if you believe hair grows 1/2 inch a month, then you also have to believe that hair grows 1/8 inch a week. That's a really good way to remember it. I used to do this. I'd shave my head with a razor on New Year's Eve as sort of a catharsis. And then I'd take a number 1 on the 7th of January to see if I could get anything to come off, and it was always just about perfect. The only big difference is going to be, I mean, why is that important? Well, if you get a guy who gets his hair cut every 4 weeks and he comes in and says, you know, it got long too fast, you know that going down a whole size in your blade is going to take you down, it's going to take you down 1 week shorter at the base of the haircut where you start at tolerance. So then the last thing I want to say about this, and then this is math. It's kind of, I've been talking for a long time. It's a lot of math for 50 minutes into a conversation. But every clipper manufacturer at the small end, the people who make plastic guards for adjustable bladed clippers, at the small end, they're going to have 1/16 inch guards. Wall calls theirs 1/2 because a 1 is 1/8 inch, so 1/2 is 1/16 inch. Andis calls theirs a 0. Wall is right. It's 1/2, right? Wall also makes a 1.5, which is 3/16. Why is that important? Well, it's because this armature, this thing on the side of your clipper, doesn't take you a full 1/8 inch. It does take you better than a 1/16 inch. So if you're using the 1/16 inch guards, you can cover any length in between with your armature. If you're using the whole number guards, you can't. I hope that makes sense. What I mean is if you cut everything with a 3, then you put on a 2 and open it up, you can't quite hit that length. You need some technique to blend, which you should have technique. But it's just mechanically, there's a difference. And again, we'll talk about it when we're together sometime. The last thing I want to say, I hope this is helpful, is that we have 4 different clipper grips. And we call the first clipper grip the conventional grip. And the conventional grip is when you have your palm on top of the clipper and your thumb on the armature. So left-handed people, your thumb will be across from the armature. Right-handed people, your thumb's going to be on the armature. That's how the clipper manufacturer designed the clipper to be held. That's why they put the armature where they did, because they figured that's where your thumb was going to be. We call that the conventional grip. It is the best grip when you are working horizontally over comb, because it does two things. It keeps the blade of the clipper flat against the comb, and it keeps your elbows down and comfortable. The second grip we have is a fanning grip, and that's where you put your thumb on top of the clipper. So it's 90 degrees different. That is great for going vertically when you're fanning or taking out lines. It's not the best grip when you're going this way because you got to keep your elbow way in the air. So it's good just to know that, you know, when you go from over comb to finishing, you're going to change your grip from conventional to fanning. That's only makes sense. There's no shame in either one of the grips, and a lot of clippers now actually are putting a little indentation for your thumb on top when you're doing a fanning grip. So the third grip is what we call the pencil grip. And the pencil grip is when you're holding the clipper just like a pencil. And the only place that this is applicable in your daily work is going to be when you're doing a flat top. When you're working in zones 3 and 4 up high on the head, you're going to want to use this. Now, my problem with this is that people that use this pencil grip, there are some times that they're using the pencil grip and I can't do it, but they're trying to cut over comb with the pencil grip and their shoulders are all hunched in and their body's all constricted. And it's a funny thing. You can't make fun of people because it feels natural. It's just really hard on you. And it doesn't give the tools the right alignment. And I used to see that all of the time when you would teach people to cut palm to palm, they'd want to do this instead of do this. And if you see how much more comfortable this is than this, it's hard to believe that someone would fall into that habit, but people do. So the last grip that we do is called a stamping grip. So conventional, fanning, pencil, and stamping. And stamping is exactly the same as fanning, only the clipper is 180 degrees rotated, and you use that for putting in hard lines. The bottom of a sideburn, the outline behind an ear. When I was in barber school, that's where you would get in huge trouble, because if the instructor saw you with a stamping grip standing behind somebody, it meant you were blocking a neckline. And they would whistle from across the room and point at you because you were an idiot, right? So just know that when you're aligning yourself, the key is always to have your palms facing your guest. That will guarantee that your elbows are down. So when you're working with a C grip with your scissor, you're always going to find here. You can see my palms. I've got my heart grip with my scissor, and I've got my C grip with my comb. Both my palms are facing out. Both my elbows are at my side. Obviously, if I've got one hand like this or one hand like this, something's wrong, right? Palms, elbows down, palms out. Same thing with your clipper. Conventional clipper grip, palms are facing out. Fanning grip, they're not. So that's your magic sort of little sobriety check. Are my palms facing out when I'm doing any overcomb work, any tool? Okay, so that's it. That's my, I'm at 53 minutes, and I'm going to check my phone and my questions and see if there's anything I can answer. Cassidy Wilson said, great tips, so important to know what tools to use. Dagny Schmidt said, this is good advice. Somebody said, period. Good advice. I'm enjoying all the tips. C grip, C grip, C grip. That's from Bailey Kelly. And should you always have your pinky out? And the answer is yes. You know, you can't always touch down, but you'll never touch down if you don't have your pinky out there looking for a place to touch down. Something else you should never do is have your non-dominant hand not engaged. I always end up seeing people with, when you start, you're scared. right? So you stand too far away from the guy and you got your clipper hand out there and you got your other hand behind your back. You want your dominant hand, whether you're combing the hair or brushing the hair or not, you want it on his head, on his shoulder, on your clipper. Keep engaged with both hands. That's the only way you're going to feel the energy coming back to you if they move. And that's the only way you're going to be able to measure how far you are from the head. So yes, you always want your pinky sticking out. Great tip, so important. So that, I think, this is, you're all saying really sweet things, but I'm not hearing, what tips do you have for men with portray ears? I'm sure that's protruding ears. My only tip is don't cut their hair too short. That's more about consultation than technique. Hold on. Oh, they're coming. They're coming. I think. Hold on a minute. Are these coming from the bottom up? Oh, so they were coming from the bottom. Let me see. Detachable clippers are just the blades. Yes, they're detachable bladed clippers. Is there a specific pair of clippers you recommend? You know, if I only had one, ultimately you're going to want both a metal bladed interchangeable clipper and an adjustable bladed clipper. I got to tell you, I'm in love with this clipper. Andis would shoot me for saying so. This is the Wall. It's their 100th anniversary clipper. It's called the 1919. It's brilliant. It's got a fluted feeding blade, which I prefer. It's a little gentler to use. It's got a magic weight to it, and it's got incredible battery life. It's powerful. It's durable. It's a great tool. I think I just got shipped a box from Babyliss of every tool they make. I'm going to start to take a look at those. My friends in Europe use them at Scorum. But I use a Wall adjustable and an Andis Supra for my interchangeable, and they are my favorites because they're both cordless. And yeah, the Supra too. This replaced the BGRs, which are great too. And this one, the BGR has an adapter where you can use a cord or a battery pack. This does not. But I think that Andis got into the cordless interchangeable bladed clipper earlier than Wall did, and I think they kind of own the market right now. Let me see if there's anything else here. And it says, do you feel that adjustable bladed clippers are good for beginners as opposed to guards? I don't think I really understand the questions. Adjustable bladed clippers usually come with guards. I would tell all of you to throw away any guard that's bigger than a 1.5. I mean, if you want to learn how to cut hair, the 2s and the 3s really encourage you to follow head shape and cut a carpet on the head. They don't fade, they don't taper. So you end up mirroring too much head shape, which I think is kind of the enemy of design. So but that doesn't mean that I don't like blades. Somebody else asked me earlier about what I do with highly textured hair. If you're cutting a lot of highly textured hair, then by far use adjustable blades. Highly textured hair doesn't like a lot of tension. So the metal blades create a lot more tension because they got way more teeth. I mean, if you think about it, you got this thing that's got 19 teeth, and you got this thing that's got 7. And with highly textured hair, you don't want to stretch it. You know, you want to cut into it. You don't want to pull it too much because when it pops back, you don't know what you're getting. So I love adjustable bladed clippers. And they're also, when you're doing really, really tight fades, they let you almost airbrush, where you don't get, that's where the adjustment's really, really helpful. And then it says, do you have a preference for your blades? I only use ceramic blades. and I only use Andis because Oster blades fit on my equipment, but they are made to spin at a different RPM, so they get really hot. And someone says, do you zero gap your clippers? The answer is hell no, absolutely not. Don't do it. You know, they come from the man. If you want a shorter blade, get a 5/0. That zero gapping is dangerous. You get closer to cutting people. Just trust the manufacturers. People always do that stuff. Barbers are the worst at hot rodding their gear. You know, they're not, until they cut the shroud off and zero gap them, they're not happy. Don't do that. How do you hold the shears if you're point cutting? I'm going to answer this as my last question. I was just in Europe for 2 weeks with the guys at Rusel, and I'm involved with helping them develop their education program. And I had a really great conversation about what it is that I teach. And I think what's really important is that you get really good at the techniques that you're going to use really often, right? You're going to do clipper over comb work, and you're going to isolate your thumb, and you're going to have to line up that clipper blade with that comb. You're going to do that forever. Things like point cutting. I mean, this guy, Russell, says, you know, a guy tilts his head back and you're clipping a hair out of his nose. It doesn't matter what technique you use. Techniques that you're not using all of the time are much less important that you've got good mechanics, because you're not going to hurt yourself ad-libbing. It's the basic things that you're going to do: spinning your comb, getting a good C grip, being anchored to the head. Those are the things that are going to take you the furthest. So you guys, I think I've run out of time, but thank you for all of your input, and I hope everybody has some good stuff to practice, and I'm going to come back and talk to you another time. Be well, stay safe, and adhere to your social distancing. Bye.
Thank you, Kurt. Next up, we have Terri Wojak. This is from Terry's LinkedIn. Terri Wojak is a highly sought after professional with over 20 years of experience in the aesthetic industry. She's the education director of Glycoala and runs her own aesthetic education company, Aesthetics Exposed Education. Terri joined us last week for an education on dermaplaning, which you can find on our channel under the Beauty Cares playlist. Today, she joins us for a lesson on chemical peels. Welcome back, Terri.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and be able to offer education to those of you that have to be at home during this time and not with your clients. So with that, today we are going to talk about chemical peels. And chemical peels, you have to check within your individual state what the regulations are regarding chemical peels, because they usually differ, and they differ if you're working in a medical office or if you're not working in a medical office. But there are many things to know when it comes to chemical peels that a lot of people don't think of. So we are going to go through a PowerPoint presentation on chemical peels. And if anyone has any questions or anything, please use the chat to ask questions. And if I don't answer during, because I can't really see the questions coming up, then I will answer them at the end. Okay, so we're going to go into the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so chemical peels. We're going to talk about formulas, percentages, and pH. We're going to talk about different acids and all of that good stuff. Okay, so indications for chemical peels. Well, number one, to lighten hyperpigmentation. Hyperpigmentation is a skin condition that many people suffer from. There is sun-induced hyperpigmentation, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation that usually happens on darker skin types. And then there is melasma, which is your deep, dark, brown, patchy hyperpigmentation that is very hard to get rid of. But chemical peels are a great go-to for hyperpigmentation because they help to exfoliate those pigmented cells, and especially if somebody's using pigment lighteners at home. To even skin tone, so pretty much like with the pigment, underlying redness sometimes goes away with chemical peels as well. So just to even out the entire tone of the skin. To refine lines and wrinkles. So by doing that deep exfoliation, you're going to soften the appearance of lines and wrinkles. Smoothing uneven texture, so things like acne scarring, or just that rough texture that you see where the skin just looks very coarse or very large pores, things like that. It improves blemishes. One of my go-tos for acneic skin is always a chemical peel, because chemical peels are going to help to exfoliate the skin. So they're going to get rid of the dead skin that accumulates in with the oil and the bacteria. So it's also, a lot of peels are germicidal as well. So they're going to fight the bacteria in the blemishes, and it's going to help to reduce the chance of getting scarring if you're doing the peels correctly and at the right times. And then also to stimulate collagen. What we're doing is we're triggering a minor wound response in the skin, and that is going to stimulate our fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are the cells that produce collagen, so that's going to help to stimulate collagen production. All right, our contraindications. Number one is pregnancy or nursing. And that is really because nobody's going to go in and say that they're pregnant or that they're nursing, and nobody's going to do like a study on chemical peels. So it's just best not to do it, to stay away from them, because we don't know what could happen to the unborn child or the baby. Use of isotretinoin in the last 6 months. So isotretinoin is the generic name for Accutane, and that is your very severe acne medication that actually shrinks the sebaceous glands. And with that, it takes a while for the skin to get back to a normal state because you're decreasing the amount of oil production. So it takes about 6 months until you can do a peel where there won't be any irritation or pain. Prone to cold sores. If somebody is prone to cold sores, especially like if they get them at the drop of a hat, then it's good for them to be on antivirals. Now, usually they will have a prescription for an antiviral if they are prone to cold sores. So just tell them to talk to their doctor about taking one the day before, the day of, and the day after the peel. And that should help to suppress the overstimulation of actually triggering that cold sore. Also, if you think somebody has a cold sore or it's the very end of a cold sore, please do not do the treatment. I learned this the hard way. I actually did a friend's skincare treatment. She swore to me that she did not have a cold sore and that it was a pimple, that she popped it and she put a hot rag on it. And long story short, I gave her a peel and she had a herpetic breakout over her entire face that night. So we had to call her doctor, get medication sent in, and, it was like a week of healing. So just don't ever let anyone talk you into doing a treatment if you don't feel comfortable with it, and especially if they have like cold sores. Poor wound healing. So like I said in the last slide, what we're doing is we're creating a minor wound response in the skin. So if we're creating a minor wound response in the skin, we don't want to have anyone, that has poor wound healing, because they wouldn't be able to heal the wound that we're giving them. So we would just be creating a wound. So anyone with like autoimmune diseases that are not controlled, cancer or undergoing cancer treatment, the skin is overly sensitized when people are undergoing cancer treatment, and it is destroying the cells in the entire body, especially if they're going through chemotherapy. So we don't want to do any peels during this time. There are treatments that you can do. You can for cancer patients, but they're really going to be more like you're just moisturizing, softening, hydrating facials, just making those clients feel good and make their skin a little softer and better. Unusual tendency to scar. So if somebody is really prone to keloid scars, or if they scar very easily, then you want to stay away from those chemical peels, the deeper chemical peels, because especially if they get any peeling or anything like that, then they may start to pick at it. And if they picked at it, then that can lead to scarring. So I would stay away from that. And then allergies to aspirin for salicylic and Jessner's peels. So salicylic is in the same family as aspirin, and Jessner's actually contains salicylic acid. So for those allergic to aspirin, you want to stay away from those two ingredients, or those two products. Now, again, learn from my mistakes. So I had a client once that came in, and we were doing facials on her all the time, and she decided she wanted a peel that day. And I looked at her chart, and it didn't say anything. And I asked her again, are you allergic to anything? She said no. So as I was about to put the peel on her face, a Jessner's peel, she told me, she goes, it's funny you asked if I was allergic to anything. One time I went into anaphylactic shock and almost died from an aspirin allergy. So needless to say, my heart dropped to my feet, and I did not perform the treatment on her, but luckily, and we don't know what would happen with like a salicylic acid compared to an aspirin or anything like that, but definitely don't want to take the chance. All right, depths of penetration. So this is going to be kind of an overview, and then we're going to go into each of the types of acids and how they work. So first, a lot of people break down superficial, medium, and deep peels. I like to break them down further. So what I have is very superficial. Very superficial is what pretty much all estheticians can do, because it's an accumulation. It's basically just working on the stratum corneum. It's just the outermost layer of the epidermis. So with that, we have our microdermabrasion, and we have dermaplaning. So our physical exfoliant, those are going to stay on the stratum corneum of the skin. And AHAs up to 30% and BHAs up to 20%. Those are going to be very superficial and very safe. I do have two questions. Somebody asked if on blood thinners or untreated diabetes, yes, those would be contraindications. So just like I said, if anyone does not have an ability to heal a wound, so if their diabetes is not controlled and they do have a very poor wound healing response, you would not do a treatment on them. If someone's on blood thinners, it should be fine. You don't want to do like a really deep peel where their skin's going to be shedding off and they might be peeling or picking at it, but you can definitely do superficial peels. And then chemical peels on eczema. So that's really tough, because when it's inflamed, you really don't want to work on it. But when it's in its non-inflamed state and it's just that dry, kind of rough skin, you can do a chemical peel on it, and it can be very helpful. Okay, back to the presentation. All right, so then your superficial peels would be anything that are still in the epidermis, but they're past the stratum corneum. So those would be your alpha hydroxy acids, anywhere from 30 to 50%, your beta hydroxy acid from 20 to 30, TCA around 5%, and modified Jessner's. Now we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but this is not an end-all be-all, because we need to take into consideration the pH of the peels as well, which we will talk about. Okay, then we have superficial to medium depth, and those are the peels that are going to go to the upper papillary layer of the dermis. Those are going to be like your glycolics, somewhere around 50 to 70%. Your modified Jessner's, and it's pH and layer dependent on the Jessner's. There are many different formulas out there. Always follow your manufacturer's instructions. So usually they will tell you, up to, like commonly up to 3 layers is superficial, up to 6 layers is medium, so always follow those guidelines. And then TCA anywhere from 10 to 20%. Medium depth peels affect the deep papillary layer of the dermis. And those are going to be what you see most often in medical offices. So you have your Jessner's, multiple layers of Jessner's are going to provide a medium depth peel. and your TCAs anywhere from like 25 to 40%. So the medium depth peels are where you get pretty much blanching all around the skin. And I will show you a picture of what the blanching looks like. But your medium depth peel, you are going to have probably about 7 to 10 days of downtime, but it is what's most commonly done in a medical setting. Deep peels are rarely done anymore, and your deep peels go all the way to the reticular layer of the dermis. And those are going to be your phenol and your Baker's Gordon. Phenol is a very strong chemical, and it has actually led to deaths, the overaccumulation of phenol. So it's important, even those that are getting phenol peels usually need to be on a heart monitor to make sure that everything is working properly, that it's not causing like arrhythmias or anything like that. So I don't think too many people will still use phenol anymore, but I'm sure there are some old school dermatologists that still use those phenol or Baker's Gordon peels. As estheticians, we know that doing the lighter, more superficial peels on a regular basis can give us the same result without the downtime and out the complications. Okay. Now, factors affecting the peel depth. So there are many different things that can affect the peel depth besides just the type of acid used. So the type of acid we're going to talk about, all of the acids have different properties. So that's going to be one difference. Another difference is the condition of the client's skin. If somebody has never had a peel before, they have severe photo damage, really dry skin that's never even been exfoliated, obviously it's going to take a lot more to get through that skin than somebody that we're exfoliating on a regular basis. Also, a lot of photo damage in the skin, a lot of times clients will have more of a reaction to the chemical peel. The application method. So you can see in the picture, this technician is using a fan brush to apply the product. That's one way of applying it. When you use a fan brush, you're going to get more acid being delivered to the skin because you're going to have more of that product on the actual brush. A lot of people use cotton squares. So if you use cotton is going to be the most gentle method. Because cotton does absorb some of that peel as well, and it's nice and gentle on the skin. Another application method is the use of those large Q-tips looking, they look like large Q-tips, and with those you can use a lot of pressure in the skin. So the pressure by technician makes a difference as well. You can say, oh, I'm going to do a light pass and just kind of feather over the face. Or you can, on your first pass, typically you want to use some pressure, you want to get in there, you want to get that peel into the skin. Prepping solution. So most companies now have a specific prepping solution that goes with their product line. If they do not, usually it calls for alcohol or even acetone. So I usually don't recommend acetone. Acetone is usually done in medical offices for those really deep peels or medium depth peels. Alcohol can be used. So basically what we want to do is we want to strip the skin of any oils because we want that peel to penetrate deeper in the skin and we don't want that oil to kind of block it from penetrating. So the prepping solution is very important. So if you were to be using a skincare line that had a specific prepping solution that was mild, and you wanted to up it a little bit, and you wanted, to be a little more aggressive the next time, you can use alcohol to really decrease the skin a little bit more. The amount of product used. So, of course, some people are heavier handed, some people aren't. Obviously, the more product you have on the cotton square or the gauze or however you're going to apply it is going to make a difference. You'll see, even if you have more acid in one area, you'll usually see spottings of blanching, which we'll show you again. The number of layers or time that the peel is applied. So number of layers is usually going to be with your TCA and your Jessners. So TCAs and Jessners are usually layered and leave on. Now, again, always follow your manufacturer's instructions because some people have different ways of doing things. They have different ingredients with their peels that may need to be neutralized. So always follow that first. The time applied on the skin. Alpha hydroxy acids are timed and neutralized. So with that, you want to make sure that you're neutralizing those alpha hydroxy acids. Otherwise, they'll continue to work and you can get like little burns or irritation on the skin. The percentage of acid in the product, obviously, you can have a 10% glycolic to a 20% glycolic. Obviously, a 20% is going to do more. And then your pH. Your pH is actually what trumps the percentage. So your pH is your acidity level. So that is how acidic the actual peel is. The more acidic the product is, the more it's going to break apart proteins and reach the depths of the skin. Proteins are very sensitive to acids. So that's why when we drop the pH of the skin, we're disrupting those proteins and we're also creating that minor wound response in the skin to stimulate collagen elastin production. So prepping the skin. Now, in a perfect world, our clients would come in 2 weeks before their appointment and they would buy all the products that we told them to use. They would go home and use them, and then they would come in to get their actual peel. And that's when they would get the best results. Now, we know it's not a perfect world, so we don't always have people that come in 2 weeks before, but if they can, it's definitely best. So what we would have them come in or start using at home is a mild keratolytic. So mild keratolytic can be like salicylic or glycolic acid. It can even be in a cleanser or maybe enzymes, anything that's going to start that exfoliation process. If there are any concerns of hyperpigmentation, or if they're darker skin types, so Fitzpatrick's 4 through 6, they would want to be on skin lighteners for 2 weeks prior. So those skin lighteners are going to help to suppress the overaction of the melanocytes, so it would reduce that chance of post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, and clients with actual pigmentation on their skin are going to see better results. The daily use of an antioxidant, we always want our antioxidants to help to protect our skin and keep them in a healthy state. Sunscreen use, we all know that, otherwise we wouldn't be in this business, but sunscreen use on a daily basis and every couple hours if you're out in the sun. And then retinoids to stimulate healing. Now, I know this is a little controversial because retinoids is a family. It's the family of vitamin A derivatives. And there are specific retinoids that you can use all the way up to the chemical peel. And those are going to be your lipid-soluble forms of retinoids. So your lipid-soluble forms of vitamin A. Those are going to be your retinol palmitate, retinol propionate, and retinol acetate. So those are going to be the best vitamin A ingredients to use so that you don't have to stop them before. If the client is on retinols or retinoic acid, then they would need to discontinue for about 3 days before the peel because those can overly sensitize the skin and the client could get some superficial burns. So here is just showing the difference between the percentages and pH. So percentages are the concentration of acid in the product. So for example, if you had a 50% glycolic, 50% of that product is going to be glycolic acid. Now, with that, you have a pH. And like I just talked about, the lower the pH, the more acidic the product is. And pH usually correlates with percentage. For example, if you had a 30% glycolic and say it was at like a 2.5 pH, if you had a 50% glycolic, it would likely be a 2.0 pH or something lower. Okay, they usually will go in order and they usually follow the guide. The thing is, though, is different companies can alter the pH by adding buffers to the product as well. So by adding sodium bicarbonate or sodium hydroxide, you can make the chemical peel less harsh. So a lot of peels out there are buffered to maintain their pH and to make sure that they're safe for clients. So this is something you really have to go through with your manufacturer. You want to ask the pH of the products, because a pH really around a 2.5 is good. Peels under a 2.0, between like a 1.0 and 2.0 are really great, but in a lot of states, they can only be used under the direction of a physician. So make sure with your state guidelines what you can use. Also with the pH scale, it is a logarithm. So for example, if you go from a 7 to a 6, there are like 10 points in between. If you go from a 6 to a 5, there are 100, a 5 to a 4, 1,000, 4 to a 3, 10,000. So the lower you get on the pH scale, like in a difference between a 1.91 and a 1.89 is a big jump, even though like a 6.5 to a 5.5 isn't that big of a jump because there aren't as many points in between. And I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's go through our different types of chemical peels and acids. So first we're going to talk about alpha hydroxy acids. So alpha hydroxy acids, also known as AHAs, are the most probably commonly used exfoliant out there. Glycolic acid is the first one that we're going to talk about, and that is derived from sugarcane. Glycolic acid is commonly used because it has the smallest molecular size, and it also helps to strengthen collagen. So glycolic acid is a great ingredient, but can be irritating on some people because of that small molecular size. But most people have good luck with it. I really like glycolic acid in toners, in cleansers, sometimes as spot treatments. And then I do like glycolic acid peels. They definitely have their place as well. Lactic acid is from fermented milk. And lactic acid is great because it has pigment lightening properties and hydrating properties. So not only are you getting that exfoliation, but you're getting some of that pigment suppression, and you're also getting some moisture along with it. So lactic acid really has kind of outnumbered glycolic acid from what I've seen in recent years, lactic acid being used in peels more. And it has a little larger molecular size, so it's a little bit safer to use. Okay, then we have citric acid, tartaric. Citric acid is usually in blends. It's usually more of a preservative, but can be used in blended peels. Tartaric acid is really not used on its own either. It's usually used in blends. It's a very mild exfoliant. Malic acid can be good for acne. It is from apples, also good for pigmentation. And then mandelic is also good for pigmentation, and that is from bitter almonds. And then I just put on the side, kind of similar to that chart we looked at earlier, AHAs up to 30% at around a 3.0 pH are very superficial. AHAs up to 50 are going to be superficial, and then 70 to 99% are going to be medium depth. So indications for AHAs are going to be your acne grades 1 and 2. You can actually use alpha hydroxy acids on grade 3 as well. Grade 4 acne, you definitely want to send to a dermatologist. For uneven skin texture, superficial keratoses, so actinic keratoses, which are precancerous lesions caused by excessive sun exposure, Alpha hydroxy acids, especially glycolic, can work great for those. Hyperpigmentation, it's going to help to lighten. It's going to reduce the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles, and also good for age prevention. So for those clients that come in and they're just starting to see those really fine lines, or wanting that cell turnover or to even out or smooth their skin, but they really don't have visible signs of aging yet, it's great to do alpha hydroxy acids to start those exfoliation processes. And I think we had a question, at what age can you start chemical peels? And it really depends on the client. I have clients that are 15 years old who have acne that I do chemical peels on. And then I have clients that are in their 70s that I'm doing chemical peels on for anti-aging. So here is just showing, this is a lactic acid peel. So this lactic acid is going to be made stronger, this particular brand, by layering it and leaving it on. So just remember, though, that alpha hydroxys are timed and removed. So this client left the peel on for 20 minutes. All right, beta hydroxy acids. Beta hydroxy acid, or salicylic, is lipid soluble. So it's attracted to lipids. It softens keratin to loosen dry, scaly skin. Allows other products to penetrate better because you're doing that initial exfoliation. And because salicylic is attracted to oil, it helps to degrease the skin. So even in the medical world, some physicians and medical professionals will use salicylic acid actually as their prep before they do a deeper peel like Jessner or TCA. It slows down the shedding of cells inside the follicles, so that's going to help to reduce the acne breakouts. Because remember, acne is an accumulation of dead skin, oil, and bacteria. And then it helps to break down those comedones. So beta hydroxy acid up to 20% is very superficial, 20 to 30 is superficial, and around 50% is medium depth. So salicylic indications, acne grades 1 through 3. Now, salicylic used to be my go-to peel for acne, and salicylic still works great for acne, but now my go-to has been TCA. TCA has been used more recently in acneic skin because of its germicidal effects and its safety, but it really works great, but salicylic works great as well. So it's good for comedones as well. Rough texture, so when someone just has that kind of really thick, rough textured skin, salicylic is good because it helps to kind of break that down. For superficial pigmentation, so for anyone, salicylic is pretty superficial peel. So if somebody has pigment that has risen to the surface, say from like a laser procedure or IPL procedure, where those darker lesions tend to rise to the surface, salicylic would be good for that to help to even that skin tone. Pseudofolliculitis. Pseudofolliculitis is a condition in which a curly hair follicle basically repenetrates the epidermis. And what that does is causes a foreign body reaction, and then it usually causes a papule or a pustule. So kind of similar to acne with that congestion in the skin, salicylic is great to reduce that pseudofolliculitis as well. And then for papulopustular rosacea. So a lot of people don't like to do peels on rosacea. I think peels are amazing for rosacea. They really help to stimulate that cellular turnover. It's going to help to even out the barrier, because usually in rosacea or sensitized skin, that barrier isn't really in its best shape. So we want to exfoliate those dead skin cells and stimulate the production of new healthy cells. But papulopustular rosacea especially, because you have those papules and pustules along with the redness, and the salicylic helps to fight those. All right, so post alpha hydroxy or beta hydroxy. Possible side effects are going to be a little sensitivity or mild itching, mild erythema. If there is any peeling, it's usually flaking. So similar to the picture that you're looking at, it's usually not like sheets of peeling. It's usually just a little bit of flaking on the skin, even if that. One of the important things to tell people that get chemical peels, and you want to tell them before their appointment, is that they may not see visible peeling with a peel. That does not mean the peel didn't work. Our cells are at a microscopic level, and you can't visibly see them being shed off. Sometimes if your client wants to see it, tell them to wear like a black shirt or something, and they may see like the particles on there a little easier. Home care after alpha and beta is going to be your antioxidants and growth factors. Retinoids after 48 hours, because retinoids help to normalize all the healthy functions of the skin. Additional moisturizer, because the skin tends to feel a little dry after a peel. And then SPF 30 for at least 2 weeks. Jessner's peels. So a Jessner's peel is a combination peel. So it has 14% salicylic, which is, remember, is good for oil, it's lipid soluble. 14% lactic, remember, which has hydrating and brightening properties. And 14% resorcinol. And resorcinol is a very effective keratolytic. So it really boosts the exfoliation of the salicylic and lactic. And then there's about 50% alcohol. So looking at the combination of ingredients, we want to make sure that with that 50% alcohol, we are not using it on rosacea, very dry or sensitive skin. The Jessner peel would not be good for, or anyone with any sort of alcohol sensitivities. Besides that, it is great for almost all other skin types. Modified Jessners, so typically, and again, always follow your manufacturer's instructions first, but typically in a modified Jessners, 1 to 3 layers is going to be superficial, 4 to 6 layers is going to be medium, and 7+ is going to be deep. And here are your Jessner's indications. So acne grades 1 through 3, remember it has that salicylic in it, so it's going to help to break up the oil and the dead skin. Good for comedones because of that salicylic in it. Uneven skin texture, kind of like the picture. Superficial keratoses, so those actinic keratoses. Hyperpigmentation, photo damage, and fine lines and wrinkles. So after Jessner's, what the client should expect is during the treatment, they may feel a little stinging or burning. The next day, the skin may feel tight and dry, and that's completely normal. You just want to tell your client to use extra moisturizer. Peeling usually occurs on days 3 through 5. That's very important to know if you're spacing your appointments apart for your clients. Some clients would rather not shed at work. They'd rather shed at home on the weekend. Some clients would rather shed during work and look fresh for the weekend. So really plan your clients' appointments according to that. Sensitivity can happen for up to a week, and SPF 30 must be worn for at least 30 days. TCA, or trichloroacetic acid. This is a man-made chemical that has no known allergic reactions. Now, this is most commonly used as a medium depth peel, but so it used to be a physician-only peel, and now the lower concentrations are available for estheticians. So a TCA up to 5% is very superficial, 5 to 10 is superficial, 10 to 30 is medium, and then 40+ would be deep. Some physicians will even use a 70 to 99% TCA for acne scars. And what they'll do is a technique called cross-hatching, where they'll use an orange wood stick and they'll put it in the acid, and then they'll make an X right into the acne scar, to that indented acne scar, to help to build the collagen. And it works really well. So your TCA indications are going to be photo damage, hyperpigmentation, your actinic keratosis, your acne grades 1 through 3. Again, I've been using it a lot for acne. For mild acne scarring, and for fine lines, wrinkles, and laxity. So expectations. Now the picture is from a 30% TCA, so not what the esthetician would likely be doing in their treatment room. But what happens is a little stinging or burning during the treatment. Again, the skin may feel tight and dry the next day, and the client should just use extra moisturizer. Peeling usually occurs days 3 through 5 after the treatment, and the medium depth peels, usually they'll peel for a good 7 to 10 days. The pigment may rise to the surface like the picture, and then SPF 30 must be worn for at least 30 days. Here's a before and after of TCA cream peels. Someone asked what line I use. I like to use Environ Skincare. Environ is by Dermaconcepts, and they have peels. They're called cool peels. And these cool peels are very low percentage, but very low pH. So instead of putting high amounts of acid into the skin, they're using lower amounts of acid, but they're tricking the skin into that wound response by using that low pH. Here's another TCA cream peel, so you can see it works really well for acne. And here's a 30% TCA before and after. So she did have a little self-tan around in her first picture, but you can see underneath some of those hyperpigmentation spots and everything, how it evened out, and even the fine lines on her forehead. So this was one 30% treatment, and she was using regular home care. All right, post-treatment. So leave-on peels should be left on for at least 6 hours. So your Jessners and your TCA need to be left on and then washed away at night or the next morning. Alpha hydroxy acids need to be neutralized. Extra moisturizer should be used during healing. A lot of people think they want to dry out the skin because they want it to peel more, but actually using the extra moisturizer is going to help the skin to heal itself. It's going to help those cells to proliferate, and the skin heals better in a moist environment. And then SPF 30 must be worn to prevent recurrence. Okay, 48 hours after the treatment, avoid the following. So sweating, exercising, hot baths or showers. They can take warm baths and showers, just not those excessively hot, steamy baths or showers. Because with that, with the sweating or the hot baths or showers, you can actually get little water blisters underneath the skin because you have coagulated the protein. So you've tightened the proteins in the skin. And if you get that moisture underneath, it can build up and leave like little tiny blisters almost around the skin. No scrubbing, no picking or rubbing, no sun exposure, and no retinoids or alpha hydroxy acids. Here's a picture of a 35% TCA with Jessner's as a prep. So this was from a dermatology textbook. So this is a very advanced procedure. And what they did is they prepped the skin with Jessner's and then they did a TCA. So you can see that picture A is her before picture. B is during. C is immediately after. D is 4 days after. And E is 30 days after. So you can see she had a really great result, but you could see that deep peeling. It does not look fun. It looks like it hurts. All right, and here are your levels of blanching. So blanching means the protein has coagulated, and it means that you have hit the dermis and you've altered those proteins. So as an esthetician, if you're not working in a medical office, anytime you even see a spot of blanching, like one little spot, you would not go any further because you've went past your scope of practice. If you're working in a medical office and you're having peels delegated to you, you would likely be doing peels that are going to give you like the letter A, like a level 1 blanching. And that's completely normal, and those are like a medium depth peel. Level 2 blanching is going to be your like medium to deep, and that's going to be a white frost all over the skin. And then level 3 blanching, that's going to be your deep peel, and that's like a deep white fluorescence, like it's a very white color, okay? But just like I said, if you're an esthetician not working in a medical office, if you see any blanching, you would just not do any more layers, or you would neutralize if it's a neutralized peel. So thank you very much for listening to the presentation. I'm still going to go over all your questions, but I just wanted to put this slide up there. I am with Aesthetics Exposed Education. We have some new online courses that are coming out, and we also have some specials with the book. This is the book I wrote. It's called Aesthetics Exposed, and it basically has everything you would need to know to work in a medical office, and even if you just wanted to work in a spa and learn a little bit about the medical world. And then please follow me on Instagram at Terri Wojak 12 or Facebook at Aesthetics Exposed. Okay, let's go over your questions though. Get out of here. Okay, so questions. Let me see what I got here. Sorry. Okay. Do you have contracts for clients to sign before treatments? I don't have contracts, but I do have their intake form, and they have a consent form for whatever procedure we're being done. How often can a client receive a chemical peel? That's a very good question. It really depends on the peel. Like glycolic and lactic can pretty much be done on a weekly basis. Jessner and TCA are typically every 3 to 4 weeks, but it really always follow that manufacturer's instructions. At what age do you recommend to start getting chemical peels? Or does it depend on skin conditions? It really does depend on skin conditions. Like I said, I have some 15-year-olds that get peels from me all the time for acne. And then I have like older women. So it really just depends on when someone is starting to see signs of aging or acne or pigmentation. But usually, starting out with the milder peels if they're a younger age, like lactic or glycolic, and then moving up from there. What pH level is commonly found in exfoliating products? Exfoliating products are usually like around the 3.5 mark. If you really want something, around a 3.5 is going to be a really good type of exfoliant for home care products. So how does one determine what level or depth of peel is correct for them? So that's a really good question as well. All the peels, basically a peel is a peel. So if somebody wants exfoliation, like you're not going to hurt somebody by doing a lactic acid peel instead of a glycolic. Now, if someone were allergic to aspirin and you did a salicylic, then yes, that could hurt somebody. But if you're just deciding between those superficial peels, one isn't going to be wrong. One just may be better than the other. And it's really studying those chemical peels and those acids so you know them inside and out. But typically, I like to do like my very superficial peels. I'm usually going for either glycolic or lactic or salicylic. If they're on the oilier side, salicylic. If they're on the drier side, AHAs. When I'm dealing with the deeper peels, if they're on the drier side or more mature, I do TCA. If they're on the oilier side, I do more Jessner. So hopefully that helps. That's like a little cheat sheet. I have to get the rest of the questions. Okay. What skincare line do you work with? I work with Environ Skincare mainly from Derma Concepts. How many treatments does it take to see results? That's a really good question as well. So some people see results they'll start to see some improvement after one peel, but typically I recommend a series of 6 to 8. So what I like to do is sell them, even sometimes up to 12. It really depends on the client's skin and their condition, but I like to sell them in packages of 3. How do you determine which peel is good for dry combination skin? So for dry combination skin, I would probably start out with a lactic and then maybe go to a TCA. And again, how often you recommend a client to get a peel? Again, that's depending on your manufacturer and the type of peel you're using. Okay. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Does anyone have any other questions? Let me see. Okay, there are a few more. Hold on. Let me get them. Okay. Sorry. Is there anything you need to avoid after getting a peel? Yes. Hopefully you saw that 48-hour slide with the excessive heat, the anything acidic like alpha hydroxy acids or retinoids, all of that for like 48 hours. As a starting SD, how many clients would be enough practice to be considered a pro? So that is a really tough thing to say because it really depends on the types of skin you're seeing. I really think with chemical peels, it's not hard to do. All you're doing is you're basically cleansing the face, you're prepping it with your toner or alcohol, and then you're putting on the peel with whatever application method you decide to use. You probably remove it, you put on moisturizer and sunscreen. So it's really not hard to do a peel, seeing as much skin as you can. So even if you have downtime at school or at work, ask another esthetician if you could shadow them or the medical professionals so you can see as much skin as you can. Even watching, try and find some reputable people that are doing like YouTube videos and stuff like that. Okay, where can I find reputable places to get peels? That really depends on, that's hard to say. Really just look for a company, maybe look for the type of peel you want. Like I like to get Environ peels, so I look them up, and then I would look at qualifications of the actual provider. Does the peel get massaged into the skin or does it just get applied and then taken off? So most companies, their peels are applied and then taken off. There are some peels, like with Environ, we have cream peels, and those cream peels can be massaged in to make it more effective. And then there are other lines out there that have some peels that can be massaged in as well. And if a client's peel stays on for at least 6 hours, does the client stay at the spa the whole time? No, they leave with the peel on their skin. You just put sunscreen on right over it. And then in 6 hours, they're allowed to wash their skin. Any other questions? Well, thank you all so much for joining. Again, please follow me on Aesthetics Exposed on Facebook or Terri Wojak 12 on Instagram. I also have a special going on with the book that I was going to do until Sunday, but I'll extend it for 2 more days. It's typically $135 on Amazon, but I'm doing a special for $85 so that people can have something to read and do during the whole COVID-19 crisis. So if anyone wants that, please message me on Instagram or Facebook if you have any questions or comments or anything, and have a great day. Everyone stay safe and healthy. Thank you.